Everybody who enters a company needs to get trained to the company standard on work and communication. They've got $20 million of work to get better on. You might have only $2 million of work to get better on. Who do you think is going to be better in the long run? If I had $20 million of work to do, by end of that, I'd be 10 times better than the person who does $2 million of work.
Your vision is, this is what we're going to get when we're at the top of the mountain. And the mission is the path that leads us towards the top of the mountain. And then the values, the equipment and the guidelines that we use to make sure that we stay on the path. Joe, welcome back to the Clichéd podcast.
Thanks for inviting me back there, Matt. I really appreciate it and had a great time on our last podcast about the service membership. So I'm looking forward to this one.
Absolutely. Joe, you're from Service MVP Training over at servicemvp.com. You're based out of LA. And as you just alluded to, we just had a great conversation in a previous podcast in relation to developing, designing, and some of the dynamics around service agreements and client loyalty programs and that kind of thing. For you guys that missed that, I encourage you to go check it out. Certainly, if you're in a service-based vertical, which is conducive to recurring work, and by that I mean any time that you might have to go back to, a client's house more than once. Very interesting podcast. And Joe's going to leave some great resources available for you guys in the form of a book which you can get hold of, which are going to be available through the show notes. And we're going to get a template as well for what a service agreement actually looks like, just to give you guys a bit of a concept that you can take and mold. And also Joe has a lot of training on that over at servicemvp.com, so you can go and actually get in the trenches over there with him with that sort of stuff. In this episode, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into the sales dynamics around client loyalty programs and how we can build a company sales culture, build, develop, and maintain a company sales culture. Let's say that because it's super important, I suppose, when we within any business that we have everyone on the same path, on the same page. And I think this conversation should ideally tie beautifully into the previous one. Would that be fair to say, Joe?
That would be very fair.
Fantastic. So I guess with this conversation here around developing a sales culture, would it be fair to say that conversation starts from the head up? Is that like a management sort of conversation?
Well, there is a hierarchy to every organization that does service for the public. And usually sometimes the hierarchy can be out of place. It can be in the wrong order. The prioritization, it can be wrong. So I'll just go ahead and give you what's called the hierarchy of a sales or a service organization and what it should look like. Hierarchy means that what's the first thing we got to do here at this company to make sure that we are everything's in the right order. It's possible to have all the pieces, but the pieces are kind of put out, all the furniture's in the wrong room. It's like buying all the furniture to a house, but then there was no interior decorator who put it all in the right place. Make sense there? It can make a difference if a professional does it versus an amateur. So in every service business, there's different things that need to get done, but let's just go over these things. Number one, at the top of the hierarchy in every company is the brand. So the brand of the company, which makes everything work. The brand is like the promise or the unique thing that this company is going to do for its community. And the brand is making a promise to the community in a general term. And underneath the branding, is the second element is marketing.
Can we
marketing.
Unpack that a second, Joe? Sorry, because I think when people typically think brand, they think of their logos.
Right, and it does communicate to the public, right? If you have a professional brand, you probably see in Sydney or Melbourne or anywhere you're at, there's some brands that look like somebody put some thought in effort and invested in the brand, and other people just kind of did their own thing, or they had the sign guy make the brand, right? So branding is something, it's the most important thing, because the way it looks, the image, the colors, the like the brand mark we have here is the Service MVP brand. It's speaking to the public in a way that we are hunting for great opportunities, and that's what we're trying to do. We have the Bowman, Archie, the Bowman who does that, and we tell the story around that brand, right? So the brand is here to tell a story about how we're going to serve contractors. Make sense?
And
To
so
help
the
them.
story is kind of
Yeah.
the vision, mission, values that support the visual aspects of a brand. Is that what you're
Yeah,
saying?
you got it. It's all together in the way we're kind of aspiring or the objective that the brand has for the way it's going to serve the community in a way. Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
that's not a small thing, but I think a lot of people just don't even recognize that it is a thing, right? They, they just like that they just put it together on a piece of paper or they use some font or whatever and they put it on the side of the truck, put a magnet on the side of the truck. It's not a brand. That's just somebody who's it's like a business card. It's not a brand. A brand is something where you're creating a certain emotion, a certain philosophy, a value system that is promising things. It's setting a standard. The brand sets a standard of the way we're going to interact with our community. Does that make
Mhm.
sense, sir? The
No, it
way
does
we're setting
totally.
a standard, whether it's going to
And
be. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
it makes a lot of sense, and it's very close to home, truthfully, because I think we see all too often this cliche approach to, let's call them vision, mission, values, which is like, we are honest and trustworthy. We value your, we are we're reliable and we are fully licensed, and all this permission to play garbage, which actually means absolutely nothing, because it's sort of copy and paste from somewhere. But I think like what you're saying is, something that we definitely try to instill in our clients is, well, how do you design something here that is actually a true reflection of the business, and it's not something that's just you're there because your competitors have got it. Like, what does it actually mean? I know we had a guy on the podcast a little while years ago now, but he was saying, and I'm paraphrasing this, and I'm probably going to screw it up, but it was in relation to vision, mission, and values, where your vision is okay. This is what we're going to get when we're at the top of the mountain, and the mission is the path that leads us towards the top of the mountain, and then the values are the equipment and the guidelines that we use to make sure that we stay on the path. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, that's a cool
That's
analogy.
good. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense for sure.
But anyway, I think
That's
conceptually a
okay.
lot of people.
That's okay. Yeah. Yeah, but I think if you don't, if you haven't, if here's the thing about it, if you haven't intentionally uh, created a brand in the right way, because it would have brand colors, it would have a brand promise, it would have brand values, and it would be setting a standard for both the internal people in the company and for the external client to say, here is what you can get, here's what you can expect from us. And not just generic, but specifically, what will this company do differently than another company would do, right? So that's the brand promise that we have. Without the brand, though, you're probably not going to have a sales-based organization or culture, because the brand, it starts with that. Then it has marketing to specifically make it easy to do business with the brand by ordering online or making a phone call or texting us, or just the things that we're trying to do to specifically show what the brand has to offer to benefit the community more specifically. And then that's where companies like the Site Shed come in and open the door to the public and say, here's how you interact with the brand. And here's the kind of solutions we have that can help you when you're in a pinch, right? That's number two, is the marketing. And then number three is to the sales team, and write this down, everybody. Keep this in handy. Sales are the reason for everybody's work. It's not an interruption to the work we do. It's not it's not something that's slimy. It's not something that's only fast talkers or Americans who speak fast. It's not slimy Americans who are trying to sell. It's listen. Sales is the reason, because if without sell something, nobody can do any work either. Makes sense? So brand, marketing, and sales are the top three things in every organization, because the way we sell something is the way that the work will get done in the field, the way we promise the solution in a way. I'm not just going to do a tankless water heater. I'm going to repipe it from the main to the water heater and put a Wi-Fi connected shutoff valve in. I'm also going to put an expansion tank. Whatever we're doing, these things are promises that the work is going to get done this way for this amount of money. Does that make sense here? So sales is number three, and then number four is operations, which is the way we do the work,
Mm-hmm.
is number four. So you got branding, marketing, sales, and then operation, which is the way we do the work. And then the final piece is financials at the bottom to report if all of this stuff we just did makes any money or not, right? So here's where the company's got out of whack, Matt. Sometimes I go to talk to a company and I'm saying, who do I need to talk to? Like somebody says, yeah, Joe, we're interested in your service. And I would say, who do we need to talk to? Well, you need to talk to our CFO. They run the company, the chief financial officer. And I'm like, so the CFO runs the company? Yeah, they make sure that all the books are done right. And they're the ones who run the company. Who does the sales in the company? We don't believe in sales. We just believe in doing a good job. Well, it's like who sells the job? People just buy. Like they don't even realize that sales is a thing, right? So when the financial person goes to the top of the thing and the brand is not even there anymore, it's a business card or something like that, or the operation guy, the service manager is telling people, here's how we're going to sell things, here's what we're going to do at the brand, then the company screwed up because the brand is at the top of the pyramid. Marketing is second, it amplifies the brand. Sales execute what the brand is promising. And then operations gets the work done the way we promised it. This is where the rubber hits the road. And then the financials can give us feedback onto did we charge enough for all this stuff to make it work. So the financials are just a scoreboard operator. It's not somebody who should be running the company.
Right.
The service manager is not the person, or office manager should not be the person at the top of the company. At the top of the company needs to be marketing and branding, and then sales number two, and then the operation serves at the pleasure of the sales and marketing and branding that we do. A lot of times, though, companies are jacked up, and you've probably seen it, Matt, where the person who does the work is the person who's running the whole company, and they have no idea what branding means, no idea what sales mean, and then what happens is those companies are doomed to be financially in a pinch because they may have a good month or a week where everything goes good, but if they don't know how to sell, they don't know how to market, they don't know how to brand themselves, then the company will suffer a huge valley of business where there is no money coming through the coffers, and then pretty soon we are forced to get a job as opposed to have a business. Then those kind of people who let the operation or the financials run their company are doomed to wind up having the company go out of business eventually, or selling the
Mm,
company.
interesting. I like that. Yeah, definitely. I dare say, especially within blue collar, within the trades, very.
Yeah,
It's
because
probably.
people own a plumbing company and they started as a plumber. However, you do realize that there are other people in Sydney who are not plumbers who start a plumbing company and they jettison to the top. Like, listen, I've seen them. I've done business with a lot of people in Australia, even as an American, and I ask you, are you a plumber? Hell no, I don't plumbing. I'm an entrepreneur and I opened a plumbing company.
Mm,
How's your company doing? We're doing 20 million a year. It's like, okay, I can see that, right? It's the person who started out as a plumber, ironically, who's the most qualified to do plumbing, but he hasn't structured it right. He makes his work the primary thing that he features, and the primary thing that you need to feature first to get the work done actually is the branding, marketing, and sales, and that will sell much more plumbing, and now you'll do a lot more work, by the way. By the way, that company that does $20 million of work, you might say, well, they're not as good as me. And I would say, I'm not sure about that, but I can tell you this. They've got $20 million of work to get better on, you might have only $2 million of work to get better on. Who do you think is going to be better in the long run? If I had
Yeah.
$20 million of work to do, by end of that, I'd be 10 times better than the person who does $2 million of work. Make sense? So even if I start out as an entrepreneur not knowing plumbing, throw $20 million of work at me, and I'll be way better than the guy who's bragging about how much better he is than the $20 million company. Make sense? So I call it the person. Listen, your ego's not your amigo. If you think that the work is the number one thing that's going to get this thing done, the work is only something that's done after somebody sells it. Yeah, the thing you hate the most, the guy who's got the wrench in his hand, who prides himself on the great workmanship, you probably hate salespeople the most of anybody, but that's the person you need to make this company successful. I got to get it through your brain, and your ego's not your amigo. Put yourself off to the side. Feed your ego or feed your wallet is what I would tell you. Make sense?
That needs to be on a T-shirt, I think.
We could do that. Let's put together and we'll co-brand it. How do you think of that, Matt?
I love that. It's funny though, like what you've basically said there is it's almost a prophecy in the sense that, and I know because I went through this system myself, and the reason why this podcast even exists is for that exact reason. In the space of, when you go through your technical college and you learn your trade, you learn how to do your thing very good, but you don't necessarily, that doesn't equip you to be able to run a business. Like that's a different set of skills which you need to. I mean, we're obviously preaching to the choir here. Like people that are listening to this are people that want to learn these things and are investing in themselves to find the information. But the point is, like, you've that stuff is aside. All this business related stuff is aside from what you're learned as you go through technical college to become the guy that can do the thing. And the guy that can do the thing is not necessarily the guy that is going to grow the best, most profitable business.
Well, it's a balance, right? I see a company is out of balance if the sales aspect and the work aspect are not 50-50. So you can't just be 100% sales and not know how to do the work. I do agree with that. Don't worry. I'm not. Listen, I'm a plumber since 1977, so I know this business for a long time. So I've been doing this for 48 years in the plumbing business. Uh, so I can tell you this. At one time, I was the best plumber and the best HVAC company in all of Northern Illinois and near the Chicago area. But I wasn't selling anything because I had the monument to the best service I could provide, but nobody was purchasing it because I didn't have my branding and my marketing and my sales down.
Yeah.
Once I got back in balance, that 50% is the branding, marketing, and sale, and the other one is operation, the second half of it. When those two things are balanced together, that's when a company succeeds and becomes you can't even compete with a company that does both of those things equally well. If you're too much work and not enough marketing, then you're going to have a bunch of payroll. You can't make payroll. You're going to wind up having that problem. You have a bunch of marketing and you can't do the job right. You're going to have a bunch of callbacks. That's not a good either. You get in the middle where and this starts with training, Matt. So how do you create the sales culture? You put just as much effort into the training of the way we communicate value in the sales process as you do into the work process we do. Matter of fact, I would recommend combining both of them together. If you teach somebody how to put in a faucet, teach them how to communicate value with that new faucet, right? So if everything you're teaching from a technical standpoint to get somebody better with electrical, like you want to sell generators or something like that, or you want to sell, some electrical panels or something like that, or lighting systems, you can sell that, but you also have to sell the technical part of it along with an equal aspect of the sales part of it as well. So the communication sales training and the training on how we do the work have to be equal parts. We can't just do one or the other.
So just to clarify here, you're talking about if you sell something, you've got to put as much emphasis into selling it as you do into them adopting it. You're not
Yeah, I
necessarily
mean,
talking
any
about like,
solution that we take on for plumbers, that might be sewer lining, or it might be a new tankless water heater, it might be, some flood protection or something like that, right? So you're something. By the way, there's always new things invented every year, right? There's something, whatever we're doing now, will be something better 2 years from now than it is now, because that's the way technology is, and just the artificial intelligence and things like that is it's producing new solutions at a record rate.
Mhm.
So if we do adopt new solutions in a plumbing company or electrical or landscaping or whatever we do, we also have to adopt the way to sell and create the benefit behind it. Because if we just leave it to our own devices, we just think people should buy it, and we think they should know to get endless hot water is enough. But they don't know that. You have to explain that the water is endless. It can be rapidly delivered to a bathroom with a pump, and you also have to tell them that it's good for their family. Their daughter Janessa, who is always late for school, this will make sure that she can take that shower on time as opposed to waiting for the hot water to occur, right? So you have to be able to tell a story not just about how the products are there, but how the products will benefit the people. Because there's a simple truth: people are more important than things. So if you explained water heaters, breakers, panels, and HVAC systems, you have to be able to bring in the people who use those systems to be able to tell them how they will interact with those systems, which really what the sales training is about, which is showing how the public will interact with a technical solution. If you can help people imagine that, then you are doing sales in a way. Make sense?
Yeah. I love that. I love the and again, so true. Like just communicating the outcomes versus the actual thing. Like it's such an important part of the conversation from sales and ongoing. In adoption, in our experience, it's like if you're talking about the actual thing, they don't really resonate with that as much as they do like the thing that it solves. So yeah, I agree a lot with that.
Yeah, we're going to do, like if I said to an HVAC customer, I'm going to do this, the system that has two different zones in the air conditioning. I did this for your wife Julie, so when she's in her room and she's watching those English soap operas or whatever she likes to watch, she could be comfortable at one temperature. And Matt, while you're watching the Australian football team and the eastern part of the house, you can enjoy your own temperature. And we want everybody to we want the home to be the most comfortable place that you and Julie go every single day. That's why we did this for you.
Yeah,
We also chose the best efficiency because we want you to put your kids through college, to have money to pay for college and things like that. And as opposed to right now, you're giving the money to the utility company, not giving it to your kids. So that's why we did that for you as well. So not just saying it's more efficient, but saying how that efficiency will impact the family more personally. Does that make sense? So in a way, you have to be able to relate the people who are in the structure in the home. How will they individually benefit from each thing that I provide?
So I guess for the better part, let's just assume that most businesses or most people that are watching this, and again, perhaps through no fault of their own other than not having considered it previously, probably don't have a solid process in place when it comes to sales. And I would love to explore maybe what that looks like as like a cadence or like some sort of like documented process within a business. I like and I get it, like what you're saying. I don't, but I know like that whole dynamic around. Okay, cool. This is when we go and install a faucet or a tap. This
Hmm.
is how to make sure the customer's using it the right way, etc. But then I think so often a lot of people will be like, "Well, I hired a plumber and they can install taps."
Hmm.
Done. You know.
Could
So
be, but what you don't realize is there's many different kinds of ways to fix the faucet. We could just when was the faucet put in? So we could look at the faucet question. Well, here's a faucet from 1978 that's in this house, or a faucet from 1992 that's in this house, right? We could just ask the client, "Did you choose this faucet?" And they go, "Hell no, I didn't. It was here when I bought the house, right? Is this the one you would have chose?" And they might say, "No, you know what? If I had the choice, I would get one like my mother has in her house." What does
yeah,
she have? She has that one that pulls out so she can wash the dog and everything like that. We need that too. Okay, so if I were to provide that, so we could do two things. I can fix the old faucet, and I can show you how to replace the faucet as well with the one you're wanting instead. So if we find out like who uses the faucet, like what's wrong with the current one, which is a technical question, and then who uses the current faucets here in this house, Is
Mhm.
this the one that you would prefer to have, or you think you'd like to have a different one? Uh, you're going to get an answer that's going to be different than most service providers get, right? Which is that actually this faucet sucks, and I wish I could get a better one. So most service providers assume that everybody is fine with the thing they have. Uh, but here's what I can tell you, Matt. It's another T-shirt. Assumptions are the graveyard of lost opportunity. If we assume people like the toilet they have or like the HVAC system they have, we would be wrong if we asked that question. So, Joe, am I correct in confirming that this is the faucet that you prefer to have in your home, or is there something different you'd like to have? And for some people, it's like, well, I don't know. What do you have available? Well, I have different faucets available that are actually more designer type oriented, different choices. Would you like to see those choices, or should I just fix the current faucet? I'd like to see the choices, Joe. Okay, well, let me do it. Let me go work those choices up. How about if I do this? I'll work up some choices that replace the current faucet with the more designer types and that are more elite and last longer, and I'll give you the a way to fix the current faucet as well. Would that be okay if I did those? If I did those things, what do you think of that? Yeah, that's what I want to do, Joe. I want to take a look at everything I could do. So right there would be a differentiator, right? The fact that I'm a plumber who isn't just committed to fixing the status quo, but to way to show people that there's something better they could have if they wanted to see that as well. I have that available for you as well. Make sense?
What do you think about companies that have technicians that sell the job and technicians that do the job?
Well, I think there are some people, after working with Australian contractors, which I've worked a lot with them, um, I would say there is a deficit. I'd say they're out. I'd say definitely in Australia, the tradespeople are definitely out of balance. There's definitely more of a, this is my job. I'm just a plumber. I'm just an electrician. I just do the work. And my job isn't to communicate with people as much. That's a secondary thing. It's a soft skill. It's something that it's kind of an irritation actually.
Yeah.
It's a stress point, but it's not a lot of emphasis that people say I already know how to talk. I don't need to learn how to talk, right? So they don't put a lot of effort into learning new ways to communicate. And so I would say the average tradesman in Australia is thinks they're good enough, even though they're not trained in communication, but they are really good at the workmanship. So I would say the average Australian tradesman is probably better than the American tradesman, I would say, in terms of how much effort they put into getting the work done right. But I would say they're not as good as American workers at communicating right. Make sense? Or I think
Yeah.
that's where it's a little bit of out of balance from what I've seen and experienced with the different people in the trades. So
No,
I
I
think that
totally
there's got to
get it.
be a effort on both elements of it. Getting the work done right. I'm not gonna listen. I don't want to sacrifice that. I've been doing plumbing for 48 years. I'm not going to try and to get a bad solution. However, I want to make sure I'm able to communicate a range of solutions to make sure the client knows that I'm not just committed to the status quo, that I have things that are better than you currently have. Make sense here? So if the public knew there was something better on a toilet that would be a power flush toilet with a comfort height, they might not want the small little round toilet that's too small to sit on. They may want something
Yeah.
better and more comfortable. Make sense?
Yeah. I think truthfully, the companies that I've seen do it well over here or anywhere in the world, really, they do have that dedicated like training cadence built into the company calendar where they do, you know, they sit down and they train the guys on these things. And I've worked in companies that we've had the whole tech daddy training and all that kind of
Hmm.
stuff over the years. And, it's you kind of have to obviously adopt it to your,
And it's grown from there. I mean that training was something that was needed at the time, but we got to pick it up from here though, guys. There's a lot more
right,
that's been developed since the 90s, right? So
sure.
so I would definitely say to at least have that training, but definitely there's a lot more that what we've learned about the science of communication is literally stunning and how it would change the difference in the outcomes of every opportunity you have and the companies that adopt it. But go back to your question. What do I think about people who sell the job and other people do the job? I feel this way, Matt. Put people in a position that they love to do their job. If somebody
Mhm.
doesn't like to talk to people, then let them do the work and let somebody else sell it. If somebody loves communicating and they don't like turning a wrench, let them do that job, right? by the way, there is a split. There's roughly 10% available in every company to sell something, and there's 10% available in every company to do something. So both things are needed. Now, if the same person sells and does it, God bless that person. But if it's needed, I wouldn't want to throw away a really good worker simply because he couldn't communicate. And I wouldn't want to throw away somebody who can communicate because they couldn't get the job done. So sometimes we need two people to do that same job. Sometimes we are blessed with one person that can do both things. Like if you put me out there in Australia, I wouldn't turn the job over to somebody else to sell it or do it. I'd want to do both things because I feel like I would be the best plumber in Sydney if I came there for a day, right?
Sure.
So for me, I wouldn't turn it over either one over to somebody else. But there are some people who say, yeah, if you can have somebody else communicate for me, they would appreciate that because they don't want to communicate like that. Make sense?
I guess what I'm trying to get at is, in your opinion, these skills something that can be taught, or is it something that's just ingrained?
It's not ingrained at all. It is something that is trained. However, it is something that you have to want to learn and desire to
Right.
learn. Uh, so no training will ever be effective if the culture kills. That's what this call is about,
Yeah.
really, right? If the culture kills it, nothing can be achieved. If the
Sure.
culture supports it, it's endless what can be achieved. So
Right.
the culture talking about how we communicated something. Like there's two guys by the dumpster talking about plumbing. If part of the conversation is about the word, here's the words I used to get the customer to purchase this thing, and they're talking that way, and the other guy is saying, here's the tool I used to get the job done right. That'd be awesome, wouldn't it? Where both people, where we're kind of learning how to be better on a holistic fashion, where the sum of everything is we communicated the value and we executed the value. I think both things are needed, and I think, man, I would love to be somebody who makes a difference in Australia and in the United States to bring both of those things to contractors that need it, because I think it is. It's because there's been. I'll tell you what. There's many. The streets are strewn with many contractors who could do great work, but they simply couldn't communicate value, so they wound up going into something else because they just didn't. It's really sad because a lot of hardworking people just wind up getting out of the trades because they just couldn't communicate.
Well, I mean, like I say, it's a prophecy. It's the intellectual that can't sell the service that goes broke, kind of thing. The highly educated, triple degree, person that just can't sell it. So or
Right.
communicate it, essentially tell the story, right? Like, so yeah, no, I agree. And I'm curious, I suppose, with this in line, like from a process perspective, when we're looking at like coming from the top management wise, yeah, in your experience, what's the best frameworks that you've seen deployed, which can help create a consistency or some sort of structure within the things we've been discussing there?
Well, I think it has to be baked into the cake. It can't be something where it's like a weird thing we're doing. If I say we're going to do some communication training, that should
Yeah,
just be something that somebody who's oriented into the company would be tested on a technical basis about their, hey, I'm a experienced plumber. I'm going to join your company. All right, then pass our plumbing proficiency testing to make sure you know how to do. It should be easy to pass that test then, right? Now the second thing would be we also have communication testing or a standard there too. How do you think you're going to do there? He's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Well, then we're going to put you through the training program there, right? So if somebody came in, and even if you did technical training, uh, like I wouldn't assume everybody just because they said they know how to do something knows how to do it. I want to test people to make sure that even if you're an experienced plumber who's been doing it for 50 years, it's possible you're doing it wrong for 50 years. So I want to make sure I confirm that you understand the way that our company does the technical part of the job. And secondly, I'd like to make sure that you're tested on the way that our company does the communication part of the job. And most likely, they would probably get 50% of the technical part and 10% of the communication part. And so most likely you're going to have to train people on both elements of it, that everybody who enters a company needs to get trained to the company standard on work and communication. We provide the communication training at Service MVP. That's our number one thing. We will, for 3 weeks, orient and onboard an employee and graduate them in week 4 on how to communicate value and how to make how do you communicate the prices, how do you communicate service agreements and all that kind of stuff. The work part of it, we do a little bit of it, but mainly we leave it to the owner of the company to have their own standards, and we will encourage them. We do have stuff on that too, but the bottom line is, I think if it's baked into the cake, like here's a standard on how you're getting trained, then we can coach you to be accountable to do what we trained you to do. But if you didn't train people to begin with, Matt, the company
Yeah.
has no chance of doing anything. Now it's just a slipshod mess. Sometimes you have good weeks, sometimes you have disasters because there's no standard that's being followed. The companies that you know, that I know probably too, the same companies that have achieved a lot in Australia and places like where you guys living over there, is companies that have that standard and they don't just let people into the company without getting graduated on both the workmanship and the communication standards that the company has. Make sense?
Don't blame them, train them.
It's instead of firing them, fire them up, right? They always say.
Well, I mean, look, it's so true, and I think like the big takeaway for me is just helping. Like, I hope you guys understand, and truthfully, like I question whether anyone's doing this the best. There's always probably room for improvement with this. It's like showering; you just got to keep doing it. But like having some sort of process that people can come into where they are like there is a defined training aspect to what they to equip them to be able to do their job the best way is essentially what I'm trying to say. And I think it's so easy to, and I've been guilty of this over the years for sure. Like, when you hire someone because they say they can do something, they don't do it well, you fire them, then you realize you didn't really give them any runway or any training to support it. You just expected them to be able to do it. And
Yeah, I
one of
think
the
I think
hardest,
there's I think the reason why we hang on to employees for too long, like, so why does the company hang on to an unproductive service technician or salesperson for too long? The reason is we blame ourselves because we never knew how to train the person, and there's a sense that makes us feel like it's not their fault, that we know most of the blame is us as leaders because we didn't have a solution to get that person trained to begin with. And then we blame ourselves, like, how can I fire the person? He never got trained. We never really sat down and went over it with him the way I would do a call or the way we would do this job, right? So whenever we have guilt about letting people go, so anytime you're saying, why don't you fire that person? And you say something to me like, well, Joe, I can't fire him. He's got 2 kids and a family. And I would say, but did you train him at all? What you're really telling me, if you can't fire that person, is that you didn't train them. Because if you did train them and put in weeks and weeks and weeks into training them, and you graduated that person, then he would be doing the job right. But why do we not fire unproductive employees? Because we know we point a thumb at ourselves, not a finger out there, point a thumb at us, because we didn't take the time to onboard, orient, and train that person to our company standard to begin with. If we did that, all problems would be gone. Then everybody would be on the same playbook. And by the way, the team can only work together when the team is working on the same playbook, right? We can't just be
right?
like, I got my own way of doing things, because my own way of doing things is it's like communication terrorism. Somebody's out there doing their own thing, not doing things the way the team's doing it. He's working against the team. He's not working with the team. Does that make sense? So I
Totally.
reject people doing things their own way. If you're going to do something a certain way, do it the way the team does it, and then you'll be on the same page as everybody else. This way, the team can support you and coach you and help you, but the team can't help you if you have your own way of doing things. Make sense?
I mean, it's kind of why processes exist, right? It's to create a bit of a consistency with the way, fulfillment and things are delivered on. Um, and I know I've seen this, I've experienced this firsthand in my own businesses, and I've certainly uh, seen it firsthand in other companies where it's a lot harder sometimes to untrain someone than it is to train them. We've seen, especially like if you take into consideration, scenarios like acquisitions, and you've bringing somebody into a completely different culture and a way of doing things, and there's just this like refusal, like, oh, I've been doing this 20 years longer than you, blah 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 blah. And this is like, well,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
not how we.
yeah.
So out you go. That could, and often I've seen that happen, and you've probably seen it way more than I have. But like, so they can sometimes be the best performers in their given field, whatever that might be. But if it's not a cultural fit, and they end up just being the bad egg.
Well, it reminds me of this, Matt. People ask me all the time, how do I get my guys to accept the training that we're providing for them? And I would say the answer is training is not something that is discretionary on the part of an employee. So if I did acquire a new company in Sydney or in Melbourne or some place like that, I would say the first thing we're going to do is come in and do some training. I said training starts Monday is what I would say, and I'm not. I wouldn't ask people if they wanted to do training. I would just
Sure.
say training is 7 a.m. Monday morning. I'll see you there.
Yeah.
People who want to stay employed, we'll see you Monday morning at 7 a.m. Those who
Yeah.
don't, then I assume you vote with your not being there. You're telling me the answer, right? So here's the thing I found, Matt, is that when you say people, we're going to do this training, and some people say, I don't want to do the training, and I would say, well, I'm the leader of the company. We are going to do the training as a team. Do you support your team? Yeah.
Yeah.
We're doing the training for you and your family so you can make the most income for your family, so you have the best resources. Do you support your family? Yeah. Well, that's why we're doing the training. So if you support your family and you support the team, then I will see you there at 7 a.m. If you are going to fight the training, then I will see you at a different company. That's where we're at. I mean, so what
Yeah.
should we do? That's the phrase. What should we do? Right? It's like either make a choice because training is not something that you ask your employees permission to do. Listen,
Mm-hmm.
for the consideration of a paycheck, you will determine, the leader determines what we will train people at this company on doing. Stop asking people if that's what they want and start providing it instead. Because here's the
Mm-hmm.
thing I say, Matt, training to make a sales culture happen is not something that I'm going to ask my team for. If they want to do it, I'm going to say we're doing it and it's required as a standard to work here. So in 90 days, everybody will graduate this training, and that's what I want. Now, if we lose, 3 out of 9 people, I'd rather have actually one person who would do what I want than 8 people who won't do what I want. Does that make sense? So if they all quit, I'd be thank you. They just made my job easier because I was about to have to fire 8 people. They made
Yeah.
my job easier. I'd rather start with one person who wanted to do what I want to do and keep building again back up to that 9 people because then I'd have a winning team that would be dominating. Make
Yeah.
sense?
Sure. No, I love that. And you've kind of answered the question whether you meant to or not, but just like it needs to be something that's in the calendar, and it needs to be something that exists as part of the team culture. Like Monday mornings at 7 a.m., we do training for 2 hours or whatever it might be. And that's just something that's got to exist as part of the way that
The
business
number one
operates.
thing that you can tell a company that's professional from non-professional. The professional company has it on the schedule. That's all there is to
Right.
it, and they've got an agenda for it. That they like not only do you have to have it on the schedule, but you have to have an agenda and the subject. That's where we provide Service MVP. I mean that book I wrote that's on Amazon, a bestseller. It's got over 30,000 copies sold.
Wow.
It's like a playbook for the service industry, 430 pages. It's not watered down, right? And it's if you want to know what to train on, well, there you go. There's 430 pages. By the time you finish all 430 pages, you could start over again next year. You would be able to start over again next year. It'd take you a year to get through that entire book. Make sense? So,
Sure.
so there's no shortage of things to learn when it comes to communicating. I mean, guys, just look at your own marriage, look at your own relationships. You have a lot to learn there, right? You say, I know how to communicate. Really go home and talk to your girlfriend or your wife. You really know how to communicate? Ask her if you're really a good communicator and what do you think she's going to say? Most likely you probably could improve, right? So I would say, the training, the number one thing is scheduling it. If you don't schedule it, you don't have an agenda that's going to work. You're not confident in what you haven't. You can't train on something you haven't been through before yourself. So the leaders should go first, and they should be taking the lead on it first. Then they should teach their team what to do, and they should be part of the training process as well. So I don't believe in just handing it over to DVDs, like even the Tech Daddy stuff. I believe that you need to learn that yourself and believe it and then teach it with the DVDs. Same with Service MVP. We're a modern version of Tech Daddy, if you will, uh,
Okay.
and uh, and we've just modernized that whole concept as to what's more specifically relevant to what's happening today, rather than in the 1990s and that part of it. There
What
makes
is it?
sense.
Learn, do, teach. Is that the
Right, you
man?
better master it first yourself. At least go through it yourself so you can explain the different nuances to what we're expecting on this whole thing. But there are non-negotiable things we're going to ask. There are certain things that there might be different twists and choices that a customer could have, but you got to learn those things, right? You have to learn how to how to give those choices to clients so that they can choose the one that's right for them.
Yeah, love it. Awesome. Well, look, mate, this has been such a good conversation. I truthfully feel like you and I could probably sit here and talk for days, ending up down multiple rabbit holes. But in the interest of time and
Hmm.
respect to your calendar, we'll probably get to wrapping this one up. I hope that was useful to you guys out there. And again, I really encourage you to head across to the show notes where I'm going to have links back to Joe's books, the website, his email, and anything else you need to get hold of Joe, um, and Service MVP. Yeah, I think probably the wrap up, the takeaway for me on that episode, Joe, was like we just summarized at the end there. Start with scheduling and come up with a content that you need to be training people on, and then just get it done as part of a regular cadence. And one thing I might add to that as well, just in the interest of longevity, is when you do these trainings, do record them and do add them to some sort of resource where you can refer other people back to it at a certain time to prevent you from having to go through and recreate that same training over and over and over and over again. And sometimes you will have to do that and you'll get better results from doing that. But still, it is good when you have certain trainings that you can send to people, especially if they're, not on site or they're out and they're like, how do I do this? Bang, here's a video or something along those lines.
I mean, even like the book "What Should We Do" on Amazon is like $26.99. So I mean, American. So you get a book, you open a chapter, and you say, "This is the curriculum we have," right? So we've even given you a curriculum. So for as little as $25 or whatever, $26, it's ridiculous to not have something like that you could at least go back and create that curriculum for yourself, because it is something you have to refer back to. You can't just train it and then forget it. It's got to be put into the company on a permanent basis, installed and implemented on a permanent basis. But again, when you do make it, implement the training, that whatever training you do, you got to document the training so you can go back and make sure that we have a record of what we just did to go back and cover it again. Because I'm going to tell you something: if you lead a company and you're a sales manager, or you're by de facto a sales manager, uh, you're going to ask yourself, how many times am I going to have to train the same people on the same subject? And the answer is it's endless. So if you
Cool.
don't like training people, hire somebody who does, because you're going to need that over and over again. Make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, couldn't agree more. Well, mate, this has been fantastic. Thanks so much for your time and your expertise. And yeah, again, I hope your listeners and viewers got a lot out of that, because I certainly did. And now it's a case of getting out there and implementing some of these things. So I'd love to hear your feedback and comments. If you've got any questions or anything that you'd that we didn't cover off in this episode, please let us know wherever you see this come through in socials or in the emails or whatever, and I'll try and coax Joe to come back on and resolve some of those questions too. But mate, thank you so much. It's been really good. And as I mentioned before, I'm going to put links to everything in the show notes. So if you guys out there, make sure you do go and check those things out. It'll be well worth your time.
Thank you, Matt. Have a great one. I appreciate you allowing me to be here today. I appreciate that.
Thanks so much, Joe. Appreciate that. And that's a wrap.
New Zealand-based home renovation company, 6,593% ROAS. Sydney-based solar company, 2,700% ROAS. Hunter region-based bathroom renovation company, 5,616% ROAS. Melbourne-based building company, 13,182% return on ad spend. Adelaide-based solar company, 2,881% return on ad spend. Guys, the list goes on and on. If you're a trade-based business and you work with projects like roofing, solar, bathroom renovations, kitchen renovations, anything like that, head across to tradie.wiki/pod for podcast. Tradie.wiki/pod for podcast. Book in a conversation. It is game changing.